Hey, gang. When we left Joseph last week, he had just done something amazing. Well, not him, but God had done it through him. Now, let's see if we can remember everything that he went through to get to where he was. Because when we left him, Pharaoh had just made him second in command over the whole country of Egypt. So we first met Joseph. He was a son of Jacob. And Jacob had a lot of sons, but Joseph was his favorite son. And he taught him at home, and he gave him a coat of many colors, and his older brothers were jealous. And Joseph had two dreams, remember? Once he dreamed that they were going out and getting wheat, and they bound the wheat stalks, and he and his brothers were out there, and his brother's stalk stood up and bowed to his stalk. That didn't make his brothers happy. They were like, we're going to have to bow down to you, our runny little brother? No way, Jose. So then he had a second dream. And this time it was in the sky. And the sun, moon, and stars bowed down to him. And even his dad said, what, your mother and I are going to bow down to you? So Joseph was just telling him what he dreamed. Remember, he was checking his brothers, and his brothers were mad. They didn't like his coat. They were going to kill him, which is terrible. Then one brother felt guilty, so they just threw him in a pit. They're like, well, let's just leave him in the pit to die. And like, no. Then these slave buyers came by, and they bought him. They sold him as a slave. They lied to their father and told him that some animal must have eaten him because they killed a goat and bled all over his coat and tore it up. What a mess. Well, then he became servant in Potiphar's house, remember? And God's favor was upon him because he did right. He chose to do right even when it was difficult, even when it didn't make sense, even when he didn't have to. He could have been ticked off because he was in Egypt. He wasn't even in his country anymore. Nobody knew him. Nobody cared. He could have done whatever he wanted to do. I'm talking fast today. But he did right, and God was happy with him. And God blessed everything that he did. And Potiphar made him second in command in his house. He was in charge of everything. Everything that Potiphar did went through Joseph. Potiphar just ate dinner. That's all he had to do. But Potiphar's wife was a bad person. She was an evil, wicked lady. And she tried to get Joseph to do wrong, and he didn't. And she falsely accused him. She lied about him, and he ended up in prison. He was in a pit. Now he's in prison. And so then remember, the baker and the king's cupbearer, both the royal baker and the king's cupbearer, got thrown in prison. They both had dreams. The same night, they were troubled, and Joseph interpreted both of those dreams. And he told the baker that you're going to be in trouble and be put out, cast out. And he told the cupbearer you'll be restored to your position. And both the dreams came true. And the cupbearer, when he was leaving prison, Joseph said, remember me, remember me. And the Bible tells us the cupbearer forgot him. Just forgot. Plain old forgot. He'd done this great thing for him. But even in prison, Joseph, remember, was in charge because everything he did was blessed by God and everyone could see it. And he was in a country that didn't even believe in God, but yet they saw there was something different. So Joseph was being what we call a Pilate because he was loving God and serving him and doing right, even when it didn't matter. So, what a mess. Well, then Pharaoh had a dream, remember? Pharaoh had two dreams. So now we're on dream number 5 and 6. And Pharaoh's dream about the fat cows got eaten up by the skinny, scrawny cows. And then the 7 ears of corn got eaten up by scrawny ears of corn. So corn was eating corn. That's the weirdest dream to me. So we got this weird dream going on. He asked his wise men to interpret the dream, and nobody can do it. So Joseph comes in, like we talked about on Friday, and he took time to get ready, and he went before Pharaoh. And just like he'd done with the baker and the royal cupbearer, he told him he couldn't do it, but God would do it. God would interpret the dreams. It wasn't him. He gave credit where credit was due because he knew that God gave him the power to do what he was able to do. And so when he went to Pharaoh, he told Pharaoh that he couldn't interpret the dream, but that God could, and God would. And he told Pharaoh what the dreams meant, that they were going to have 7 years of plenty and 7 years of extreme famine. And so they were going to need to save part of the harvest every year for 7 years and make sure it was stored and protected so that when the famine came, there would be food for the people. And Pharaoh looked around and he's like, I need a wise man who could do this. Who do you recommend? And he thought for a second and he said, you're the man. And he put Joseph in charge of all of Egypt. put him in command of everything but the throne. So Joseph was in place. And the Bible says that Joseph was in this place and went through all of these circumstances because God was meaning it for good. Didn't look like it at the time. But now Joseph, and we know the end of the story, but Joseph didn't. So he's in second in command. That sounds really great, but his family's not there. He's been taken away from his family. He may never be able to go back and see them. He doesn't know what's happened to them. He loved his mother dearly, and he doesn't know he loved his father, and he hasn't heard anything about them. There wasn't mail back then. So just like Joseph predicted, there were 7 years of plenty. So this is where we left Joseph, and he was managing. And remember that the Bible, God had told Pharaoh in the dream and to save a portion of the harvest. So Joseph did that every year and put it into storehouses, and they kept it because it was dry and it would store. They would dry the grain, and so it would store for a long period of time. Well, the 7 years finished, 7 years of plenty, and just like God told Joseph to tell Pharaoh by interpreting the dream, famine came, and it was an extreme famine, and it affected not just Egypt but everywhere. And it affected Joseph's family, and they needed food. And so Jacob, Joseph's father, sent his older brothers to Egypt to buy food. He wouldn't send his younger brother, Benjamin. Joseph had one younger brother. His name was Benjamin. He wouldn't send him. He didn't want to lose. He'd already lost Joseph. He didn't want to lose another son. So he sent his big brothers to buy food in Egypt. And when his brothers came to Egypt, they had to buy food, and Joseph recognized them. But they didn't recognize him. It had been a long time, and now Joseph was dressed like an Egyptian. And they never thought, they sold Joseph as a slave. So why would he be in charge of all of Egypt? That wouldn't make any sense. But Joseph recognized them. And Joseph's heart hurt because he loved them so much. And he wanted to fellowship with them. But you're going to have to come back tomorrow to find out what happened. Have a good night.